Welcome to Sculpture Vulture. I'm Lucy Branch, a sculptural conservator and author, bringing you a series of interviews with some amazing sculptors who inspire me, and I hope will do the same for you. You can see the photographs accompanying the interview, the episode show notes, and get a free novel from sculpturevulture.co.uk. Hello Sculpture Vultures! It's so great to be back for a new season. I hope you all had a fantastic summer. We've been really busy at Antique Bronze and covered some fantastic sculpture conservation work. Can't mention them all, but I did want to talk about one at University College London, my old university, and gosh, it has changed and grown up so much. There's a really fantastic team of people over there shaping the public spaces and the culture of the college, including Sam Wilkinson and Simon Kane. I'm definitely sure there are others who I didn't get to meet, and are all working under the hood. But I felt very privileged to get to help with Bouke de Vries' first public bronze sculpture, which has been placed in the university. And I don't know if you know Bouke's work, but he's a genius. That's all I'm going to say. He's a genius ceramicist. So I was particularly excited to meet Bouke because I do love a bit of serendipity in life, and it does come just when you're not expecting it, just out of the blue. And my latest novel, Restoration Murder, the main character is a ceramics conservator. And the object significant in that story is one of Grayson Perry's vases. But you won't be surprised when I tell you that I didn't get to talk to Grayson. He's definitely on a whole different level than me. And so for this next book, I'm hoping that Bouke could be my man and help me to make that plot really authentic and give it some special features. And I think if I was a tipster, I'd say that you're going to see a lot more of Bouke in public spaces. I think he's got it all going on. So, and it was a real privilege to get to help him birth that first piece of bronze. So there's also been loads happening with other sculptors that I'd interviewed in season 1, and I need to mention a few. There's probably been loads more, but Rodney Monday had his magnificent bronze sculptures put in place as part of the Project Blackjack in Cirencester. And I think Rodney had a really tough time doing this work because he was separated from his family who were back in France during the pandemic, like the real, not that we're not out of a pandemic, but when we were really in the thick of it and not allowed to travel at all. And he was separated for an awful lot of months. But he, being a professional that he is, he kind of rose above it. But I can't help thinking that, that could make a real dent in your creativity, but it's obviously made of very strong stuff. And the huge empty alcoves on the Cirencester Towers are now filled with St John the Baptist and the Virgin and Child, looking like they really always have been there. And I'll put a link in the show notes to the BBC videos. He did get an awful lot of press, and I must say that now that scaffold is down, you really can appreciate them. He nailed it. Well done, Rodney, if you're listening. Amy Goodman had her magnificent Arborfield horses installed. Now, they're a triumph, and if, like me, you're a worshipper of horses, my goodness, they are so worth a visit, and I'm definitely having those in my sculpture park of my dreams. I'm putting an order in now. They're absolutely stunning, and I can't gush enough about Amy's versatility. If you follow Amy on Instagram, she just knocks it out of the park over and over again. So do take a look at those sculptures. Hugh Chapman has been dabbling with stainless steel, and Lockbund Foundry have outdone themselves creating a sculpture called Transcending for him. Hugh's abstract forms lend themselves to the kind of ethereal quality that you get with polished stainless steel. It's not my favourite metal, I'm going to going to tell you that right now. It's just incredibly limited to restore, but if you don't have to restore it, it's a wonderful thing. And in this case, it's absolutely stunning. He's been snapped up, I can tell you, by the Nordic Art Agency as one of their stable of sculptors, and I can really see why. He's a perfect sculptor for that kind of market. So the podcast has been slightly hijacked by the Emily Williamson campaign. I hope you're riding with me on this one. I had planned and recorded multiple interviews over the summer for you, but many of the wonderful sculptors that I've spoken to have had to be slightly pushed along the line because of this Emily Williamson deadline. I wanted to interview those that had been involved and shortlisted, but they have a deadline of November, and so there has had to be some last minute rejigging of episodes. The campaign is so worth it, but goodness, I tell you, my next book needs to be written. It's got to be called How to Make Your Life Incredibly Mad When Your Life is Already Incredibly Mad. But before we start today, getting into the thick of the episode, I really wanted to say thank you to all those people who have supported the podcast by buying one of my novels or my non-fiction book, Bronze Behaving Badly. It really does help. But if you are a little short of cash and you wanted to help the podcast in another way, which is free, please don't forget to rate the show. You can do it on any of the podcast apps, and I'm getting so much great feedback from people, but I need reviews, please. That would really help too. A 5-star review, even better. It helps people to discover the podcast, and it sort of tickles the algorithm and pushes it up the rankings. So help to make the podcast flourish, please. If you can, it only takes a second. So let's get on with the episode today, which is going to be a little bit different. This is the first of the practical episodes in the season where I will be discussing aspects of sculpture conservation, which I hope are going to be useful to you. Sculpture conservation is my big love, everything to do with sculpture and making sure that it is here for as long as possible for everyone to enjoy. I'm going to be covering all sorts of themes on how to care for bronze sculpture particularly, and tips and tricks, which I hope will save you lots of bother down the road with your own sculptural works. My aim is going to be quite a simple one. I want to stop you ever having to say, "Darn it, if only I'd known that." So in this first episode, I'm going to be easing us into things today. Nothing too heavy, just a little bit of discussion around some ideas about conservation and why conservation knowledge is useful to you. That might be if you're a sculptor, a collector, a gallery owner, or someone that just works in the field. Let me start by saying that wherever bronze sculpture is found, in the wings should be a conservator. Now that might sound like a little bit of hyperbole, but the reason that I have to stress it is that the nature of bronze is to change. And now I'm not being all woo-woo about this. What I mean is that its chemistry means that it is a reactive material, which is why we all swoon at the incredible colours that it can form when it's patinated. But not everyone puts 2 and 2 together and realises that the very thing that enables it to colour so beautifully also enables it to be inherently unstable, which means that we have to take measures to ensure that we are able to slow that natural inclination that it has down. Now, let me pre-qualify this a little bit. Bronzes that live indoors are not exposed to too much moisture, and they have a little bit of relative humidity to deal with, but nothing too significant. And water is the main issue when it comes to change with bronze. And so, as you know, my love is large outdoor sculpture. And so really that's what we're going to be focusing on in this session and in the other ones coming up. So I'm not saying that what we want to do with a statue is to keep it in stasis. That certainly isn't the point. But in an ideal world, there would be an evolution of the statue's patina and a formation of a naturally occurring patina, which is a thing of wonder and beauty. The idea that time adds something that humans never could is a really wonderful one, and it truly can be so. But like everything in life, reality is not necessarily the same as theory. The patina that often evolves has just as much chance of being ugly and disfiguring and really quite brutal as it does beautiful. And I have seen the most heavenly cherubs turn into the most sinister demons, and just because of the way the corrosion has formed across the face. And it's a conservator's role to intervene before that point and make sure that the sculpture can continue to be enjoyed and still evolve in a way that makes it a part of its environment and makes it unique to that sculpture, but not to the extent that we no longer can enjoy the form and the figure. Now, this is possibly not something that you've ever thought too deeply about before, but conservators are not the same as restorers. I'm sure many of you will have seen the popular show The Repair Shop. I'm presuming it's worldwide, but certainly in the UK, it's incredibly popular. Now, conservators, we can restore. We have all the same skills. We're trained. We're actually known as conservator restorers, which is an incredibly cumbersome word. But our focus is on prevention, so that the sculpture never gets to the point where the object needs to be fully restored. Let's face it, I mean, when someone has paid X thousands, actually, I hope it was X millions that they pay for your sculptures, they want to preserve the authenticity of the feature, the original work that was carried out, even though it might live now in a challenging environment. It doesn't matter that the artist, the sculptor, may not have actually patinated their own sculpture. Sometimes they do, but many don't. It could be a patineur in the foundry that was part of the original creation. But they were the hands of the sculptor manifesting their vision of what was wanted. And what a conservator does is they are trying to maintain the visual balance of the sculpture, but also they are protecting that authenticity as much as they possibly can. So our stage is vital to prevent the sculpture one day needing to be fully stripped off, say, and restored by someone else in the future. And the thing is, that future person hopefully was accredited by the Institute of Conservation, but if they weren't, no, I mean, the reality is when things get restored, people aren't necessarily in contact with the artist. They should be, they may not have been. And what can happen is that the original finish, which was so important to the sculpture, or even the vision of how they wanted it to have changed over time, is not recognised. And people just think, oh, well, it looks awful, I want it to look better, just fix it. And that is something which can be quite dangerous territory to lots of people, and particularly people who understand the importance of the artist's intent. Now, you're probably thinking, well, our foundry just said to wax the statue regularly and it'll be fine. And to some extent, that is absolutely true, but it's true in the same way that telling people to eat healthy will stop them getting sick. It's nice, straightforward advice, but it's a little bit simplistic. First up, even with the absolute best intentions, owners and custodians never seem to get round to dealing with finding someone to clean or wax their sculpture. And it might sound simple in theory, but there are tons of problems with allowing, say, a gardener or a handyman, someone that fixes the fence, to clean and wax your sculpture when they've no idea what they're supposed to be doing. So what they do is they trot off to YouTube, usually, and although the instruction from the foundry might be clear, make sure you clean and wax it. Now, cleaning means different things to different people. Now, if you're particularly interested in this, I've got a whole article on this on my website, antiquebronze.co.uk, if you go to the blog. And on YouTube, cleaning usually means get out some lemon juice or bicarbonate soda or salt. People love salt and rub it in. Please don't do that. Please don't let anyone else do that. Let me tell you, the result is nasty and it's irretrievable damage at that point. Restoration becomes then the only option. And it's not that I am so down on restoration. I'm truly not. I think there can be some magnificent, we do some magnificent restoration work. But restoration is generally an irreversible process. And what I mean by that is that the techniques we have to use are permanent. With conservation work, nearly everything I do is reversible, so that if anyone were to not like the work I'd done or disagree with how I'd approached it, or the artist were to feel that we hadn't quite captured the vision that was intended, without any damage to the sculpture whatsoever, it can be undone. Now, why is that relevant? I mean, you might think, well, that's really like, being picky about something. Well, if you think about things like the Elgin marbles, now I know that you may say, well, my work is far away from the Elgin marbles, but the historical importance of something like that, and many of the paintings at the National Gallery that were scrubbed and altered irreversibly by restorers back in the day. Now, the ethics that we work by now are there to prevent that sort of thing from happening ever again. Now, with hindsight, we see what was wrong with such an approach that was taken, but at the time you do things, you cannot see things from a distance, and it's very hard to know how our peers will view the techniques that we have today. And so the aim is to be erring and being cautious and ensuring that what is done can be undone, which is something that they just didn't do in the past. Now, going back to unqualified people cleaning and waxing things, the thing is that generally people can't help making value judgments about things, even if they're told not to. Oh, it would be much nicer if it looked shiny. I don't really like this patchy colour that somebody's put on. I'm not kidding, that genuinely is the kind of thought processes that go through, and we hear it with people who ask us to come and restore things after they've been damaged, and they explain what they were thinking. So with a conservator, we are trained and should be accredited, which means that we know what we're doing, essentially. We are a sculpture's personal protector, a bodyguard, if you like, someone to watch out for things that might be damaging them as well. So not only might we be undertaking a preventive treatment, but we are there to make sure that issues around the sculpture are not advancing any damage, and we're there then to react to that damage if things are happening. So it might only be that we do a simple treatment, but we draw attention to the groundsman that he needs to cut the trees back that are beginning to encroach upon the statue. There's all manners of issues that happen when lots and lots of leaves drop on sculptures and sit for a long time degrading. You get the organic matter degrading, and unfortunately that really rapidly breaks down the wax in the areas that it's sat on. Same with guano. You get all sorts of sticky sap can end up dropping onto the sculpture, and that sticky sap, my goodness, when it goes hard, I mean, it's resinous. So you want to try and get something like sap off a sculpture which has sat there and baked in the sun for a significant amount of time without damaging the underlying surface. Let me tell you, it is really, really hard. Now, someone who comes across this kind of deposit who's untrained in conservation is going to scrub that surface clean, and in so doing will definitely damage that delicate original patina and remove it during the process, because they have no understanding of quite how thin that patinated finish is and how delicate. Someone who is trained in the field, we understand the way that things can be removed carefully and in a controlled way, and we are wholly invested in preserving that original surface. All our techniques are focused around that central point. the aim is to stop issues becoming big issues, becoming big issues. And so there's loads of things that you can't even imagine that things happen. So I don't know, automatic watering systems is one. Oh my goodness, if you see beautiful green lawns, you can guarantee the automatic watering system may just need adjusting in a certain direction, and it may not even be going anywhere near your sculpture. But the problem is that the way that the wind works, it carries it across the sculpture. Now, if that's happening on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day, and it's hitting your sculpture continuously in one direction, you will get degradation in that direction. Now, if someone doesn't notice that and perhaps adjust the treatment routine to compensate, or get the gardeners to change the direction of the nozzle so that the water is varied in direction, that's going to cause a problem for your sculpture down the line, and a lot of problems. So every visit to treat a statue, we are there as condition checkers, the artist's invisible guardian, to make sure that the best is being done for the sculpture in perpetuity. Because you know what, it's your legacy. And although we can never stop an object from changing ultimately, we can slow that process down. And I've never come across a sculptor who has said, I don't want to slow the degradation. There are sculptors you come across who say, yes, I want it to decay. That's absolutely fine. But they don't necessarily want it to decay at top speed. Even the most brilliant, skilled foundry people, and I have met many who I am totally in awe of, they don't get to see what we see, because they are, quite rightly, on a daily basis in their foundries. Now, our role is to be out there. We are returning to sculptures and assessing the rates of change, and that's the rate of one patterner over another, one colour, the mode it was patinated, cold, hot, was it marbled? All these things make a big difference. What was the base coat as opposed to the top coat? There's just infinite things that change these issues and rates of change, and we are there to notice them. We're particularly skilled at knowing what a specific environment will do to an object, and not because of any books, unfortunately, apart from my own. No, even my own book, Bronze Behaving Badly, if you would like to have a look at it, does talk about environmental issues, but it really, this continuing return that we do, and observation that we do over many, many years, that gives you incredible sort of crystal ball insight into what is going to naturally happen to a bronze. Now, a final aspect to our work, and one of particular value to sculptors, I think, is that we are an intermediary between yourself and the client. Now, not that you don't adore all your clients, I'm sure you do, and many are quite wonderful, but actually your choice of career is to crack on and create new sculptures, and not to be necessarily being tied up or bound in with existing objects. And many, many, many owners want to talk in depth about their own sculpture and what is happening to it at that current time. And we do an excellent job, if I may say so myself, of shielding people from that very consuming, time-consuming activity. We're able to reassure and discuss and be genuinely interested in the situation, which is very important to owners and really is all that they want, that reassurance. But they don't necessarily need reassurance from you. And especially if they've spent a great deal of money on it, it's something that really can end up taking quite a lot of time from an artist's day. Now, on a similar note, we can give owners independent advice. Not that owners don't believe you per se, but sometimes hearing it from somewhere else is very helpful. Seconding your words provides an element of security for them, and we are able to be independent in a way that perhaps you're not, being the creator, the person that has sold them the statue. And that can be incredibly useful to you and them. As the season goes on, I hope you'll send me your conservation questions so that I can answer them in one of these practical episodes. Let me know what you think of them, and If you've learned anything in particular, do tell me if there's something I've mentioned that you'd like me to elaborate on further. It's a very fine line between informing people and boring them rigid, and that's definitely not my aim. I just want you to be inspired by sculpture. So the next interview coming up is with Eve Shepherd. Her work has been compared with Rodin's, which in my mind is the greatest accolade any sculptor could get. Eve's work portrays an exquisite sensitivity and honesty. She's a member of the Royal Society of Sculptors and the Society of Portrait Sculptors. And she's already done some wonderful public commissions, including works for the National Maritime Museum and a portrait of Professor Stephen Hawkins for Cambridge University. So do join us to listen in to her in the next episode. If you're looking for a new book, please consider one of my novels about the dark side of the art world, where sculpture is always at the heart of the story. You can get them on the show website, on the usual online retailers, or even better, keep your local library alive, ask for them in there. Thank you for joining me today. Sculpture Vulture has been brought to you by Antique Bronze.